Defense is only part of it. I think it's also really important for us to have an effective recovery when the incident or the breach inevitably occurs, despite our best efforts. Then it's also important to have a very mature and robust incident response plan, crisis communication plan, practice all of these things. In my experience, nothing beats the trust and relationship of one CISO picking up the phone and calling the next guy or sending a broadcast message, just saying, hey guys, be aware there's something happening here. You may be engaged in the same markets as me, but when it comes to cyber defense, we're all on the same team. There's a valuable thing I've learned over the years is that when you find someone who's made a mistake, hopefully unintentionally, and they've learned from that mistake, they've gone through the incident response with you, they understood the seriousness of what they've done, the impact of what they've done, that person is now actually more valuable because they now have that experience. So the next time they're faced with something, I guarantee you, not only are they going to be far more careful and conscious about it, but they're also great ambassadors for cybersecurity.
Hi, Andrew. Welcome to Be Fearless podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Sasha, for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did your journey start and how did you end up where you are today, CISO of one of the biggest companies out there?
I'm originally from Canada. So I started out in Canada, started my career in Canada. I won't say how long ago, but let's say it was multiple decades. And started my journey there. Certainly my journey into cybersecurity began there as well, working for various different companies in Canada, including one of the major railways in British Columbia. So I'm from Vancouver, and British Columbia is the province that I worked for. So I worked for British Columbia Railway for several years, doing system operations as well as help desk. So it was a bit of a multi-hat role. But when you're entering the industry, that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
But I certainly got interested in identity and access management and cybersecurity or cyber attacks at that time, having gone through several incidents at BC Rail. Not at the scale that we're seeing today in modern times, because BC Rail was still migrating from AS400 mainframe systems into the Windows world. So they were deploying Microsoft and to give you an idea of how long ago that was in response to the Y2K vulnerability that was coming up. So this was still in the 90s. But they were migrating to Microsoft and some of the challenges that we saw along the way and some of the vulnerabilities, actual threat actors ingressing into our environment, how we dealt with them, to me was absolutely amazing. I developed a strong fascination at that time and have been following along ever since. But how I ended up in Asia, well, so my family have strong Asian roots. So my family is predominantly originally from Malaysia, so not that far away. After I worked for several years in Canada, I decided to not spend the rest of my life just in Canada and actually see the world. So I looked around, got a job in Malaysia as a project manager for a infrastructure development project out there. So that landed me in Malaysia and worked there for several years. Switched a few jobs, moved to jobs that allowed me to see the region. So I was fascinated with travel, not really having seen much of Asia previously.
Yep.
Now, of course, I see far too many airports and airplanes. But your perspective changes as you get older. Family becomes far more important as you get older. So what got me to stay in Asia was I met someone, fell in love. We have a daughter now whom we massively love, and that's really that conflicting priority, wanting to spend more time with family and watch my daughter grow up. She's only 13, so I don't want to miss out of any more on her growing up. I think I've missed out far too much the last 13 years, and definitely want to be, continue to be a big part of her life instead of constantly being on the go. But but such as the challenges of balancing things.
Yeah. No, it's a great story how practically love brought you to Singapore. It reminds me of the Eat, Pray, Love story, how you started somewhere in Canada and then love and it landed you in Singapore where you're today. I imagine the whole working culture is so different from like in Canada and Malaysia, Singapore. Did you adopt any of the practices that came from Canada to Singapore work culture or not really?
I think I've adopted more Singapore work culture. I've been in Singapore for 17 years. So, when you talk about love, I definitely love the food. I love the culture. I love the convenience and the optimization that Singapore has in society, and then the safety and everything else that the benefits of living in Singapore, right? It's not coincidental that we've settled in Singapore and have chosen to spend the rest of our lives here. But in terms of work culture, I think the work ethic here is certainly stronger. As I said, much longer work hours. Work-life balance continues to be a challenge, and especially in this part of the world. So my geographic coverage, and I get to see, not just bringing work experience from Canada, but I also get to see, because I cover India, North and Southeast Asia, as well as Australia and New Zealand. So I get to work with a very large myriad of cultures, right, and attitudes to work and even to cybersecurity.
Yeah.
But I think that Singapore definitely has their head in the right place. They're moving in the right direction. The aims and objectives of the Singapore government, as well as the cybersecurity community here, are very clear. The desire for a safer cybersecurity aware and safer culture in Singapore is definitely predominant. Not just about how can we be more efficient and cost effective, but also how can we technically be safer? Because the threat landscape that we face globally in every country is significant.
Of course.
The bad guys keep winning a lot of these battles. So our desire to do better is felt in every country, but I think that Singapore in particular has a strategy and approach that is practical and over time, I think will help us start winning more of those battles.
Yeah. No, you touched upon a great point that as a CISO of large organization, you always have to be one step ahead of an attacker, have this amazing culture within your organization where cybersecurity comes first. So you mentioned you work across so many geographies, India, like Australia, New Zealand. How do you make sure that in each of these geographies, cybersecurity stays a priority?
I think, for one thing, it's top of mind for many executives. So, you have to have the leadership at the top. The message has to be top down, not just bottom up. So in terms of awareness, several countries have made really good inroads in terms of raising awareness. Like I think about the examples in Australia where, recent breaches have been the talk of the town, over there. And that certainly helped propel their cybersecurity strategy and help enable them to get a lot of resources as well to help them to better defend the national borders. But also, in terms of their individual enterprises, the fact that cybersecurity is one of top risks of many boards out there, if not the number one risk of many countries and boards, that certainly helps to ensure that you have the right resources, the right strategy, the right plan in place to help mitigate all that risk, to deal with all the incidents, having effective incident response plans and such. But, looking across the different geographies, I think most countries you see it reflected in the regulation as well, right? We see a lot more regulation around critical infrastructure, around basic cybersecurity hygiene, around breach notifications, right? Many countries now compelling enterprises to notify of breaches. Australia just amended the SOCI Act last week, actually. So this is now in effect where ransomware notification, you make a ransomware payment, you have to notify the government. You have to give them details about, and it's a legal obligation, right? There are, at this moment, the penalties are not stringent because I think it's in a way a little bit experimental by the Australian government. There's mandatory ransomware reporting. I've not heard of this in any other country.
I think in the US they slowly.
Oh, maybe yes. You're right. They
have to disclose.
Yeah. So Australia has followed suit as well. And but I was looking through the act, and the penalty is relatively light at the moment. But I think they're still trying to get a sense of the scale and depth of the problem. So they want to get, basically it's a way to gather data. And then once they have enough data, then they can formulate a strategy and how to better regulate that space. But, those are examples of how cybersecurity has now become a major priority for many countries. And I can think of any country, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, these countries, when I first started, even in Schneider, when I first started not that long ago, the feedback from the ground there was that, nobody's talking about cybersecurity. It's not a concern. We're really talking about operational efficiencies, cost efficiencies, talking about, forecasting for production and things like that. So it was very business-oriented conversations. And now, because of greater awareness, because of increased regulation and scrutiny by government, because people have recognized that this is a national security topic as well, not just a commercial one, there's a lot more attention to the problem. And that's helping really just drive the maturity across geographies and industries and individual corporations as well.
No, I think you touched upon such a great point, and it just makes me draw this analogy. So many organizations, they have 5 escape routes prepared. They're prepared when it comes to physical security, but when it comes to cybersecurity, it's much higher likelihood of some cyber attack happening. So how do you go about creating this culture of cybersecurity first? And as you mentioned, regulation is a driving force. But at the same time, do you think, is it effective enough, considering that when regulation kicks in, it's when you've already been breached? So what do you do as a leader not to wait that long?
So the cybersecurity regulations aren't only focused on breach notification, right? So it's very reactive in that sense. And, I know governments want to know what's happening on the ground so that if there is a national security issue, they're able to look at it from a macro level, from that 10,000 foot level and see, okay, we're having this campaign by these attackers are now hitting everybody. So we can help to mitigate that risk by broadcasting messages or fine tuning our detection capabilities, or even going after the attacker through legal or other means. Because at Schneider, we're not just an IT company. We're actually an OT company, an operational technology company. We deal with critical infrastructure. Most of our customers are critical infrastructure, ranging from nuclear power plants to electrical distribution grids. Right? So getting power to your house, water filtration, so getting clean water. So, when you think about the things that people need to survive, you need clean air, you need clean water, and you need clean food. Right? 3 very basic needs. We deal with 2 of those in a big way. So we understand that. It's important for us to understand who the threat actors are that our end users and customers face, and that we also face, because supply chain attack, right? If an attacker wants to get to your customer and user, if they go after the manufacturer of the products and services that are utilized in critical infrastructure, that's another threat vector that we're well aware of, and we take very seriously. In fact, making sure that our customers' assets are not damaged is our number one cyber risk. So we actually look at that, take a big holistic view of what we need to protect. But regulation helps drive a lot of the conversations because it's easier to talk to your board and your C-level and say, hey, we don't have a choice here. You know, this isn't me asking you for permission to do something. This is me telling you that where all of us are forced to do it.
We must.
Yeah, it's a must.
Yeah.
But it's also the minimum requirement, right? Because at national authorities, you know, from experience, understanding the mindset and working with them on many matters of national policy and digital policy, having those conversations and helping them craft and steer those messages to make it more practical. For example, we had a fantastic engagement with CSA in Singapore on the OT Master Plan that was released in August this year at OTCP. So Mr. Teo announced the OT Master Plan. Industry was consulted very heavily. And from the initial draft, that plan was altered and modified a lot with the feedback from all the industry players and all the end users and tertiary educational institutions to get the academic view on it as well. And then that plan was really, has become so much more practical. It's still a work in progress because we're still developing a lot of the conversations there. And that plan, and the other thing I love about it is the flexibility Singapore has built into it so that you can modify. You have your principles, but your application and implementation will, over time, has room to breathe and innovate and grow. Yeah. So that's a very useful approach. But it's important for people to remember that, you know, regulation and what the government can do for you is a minimum requirement because they have to write policy for everybody. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So they can't write something that is prescriptive because it may apply to company A, but company B can't use it. Right. I'll give you an example. Without naming the country, because that's not a name and shame opportunity. But there was a regulation put out not that long ago, maybe about 2 years ago, where it was mandated that every piece of electronic equipment had to provide logs. So they wanted to, they mandated, and if you just look for what you think would work without really understanding the technology or without talking to industry and the operators and the people that actually use the equipment, right? If you kind of just take that 10,000 foot view, but never get down to the ground and talk to people, your heart's in the right place, but you make maybe a poor decision. And in this particular case, by mandating logging on everything, I think, great, logs are useful. We need those to understand what happened. This is a detection mechanism. The theory works really well until you consider that in the operational technology world, half, if not most of the equipment doesn't log. Yeah. It doesn't have the capability of logging. It never has, right? These are things like programmable logic controllers that control actuators and valves and things like that. And they're just designed to open and close a switch. Yeah. It doesn't log, right? Yeah. The logging happens at a different area, in a much different place. So, by legislating that, you automatically make, almost all your operators out there in breach. Yeah. Immediately all their operations are illegal. So which doesn't make any sense, right? So I think that industrial consultation is really, really important. But people also have to recognize that you cannot be compliance focused. It is the minimum requirement. It is a general approach to your cyber hygiene. If you want to be cyber mature, you have to take a risk-informed, risk-managed approach to your infrastructure. Understand your threat landscape, understand the risks, understand the vulnerabilities that you have. What is the probability that you're going to be attacked, which is for most people almost 100% because we are constantly under attack. Yeah, exactly. It's a reality. And then what is the impact? How bad is it if we do get breached? Because we can't get it right 100% of the time. There's no such thing as perfect security. So what's the impact? And then what do you do, right? And then you build your cybersecurity program around those very risk-aware conversations. If you just do the minimum, well, then you have minimal cybersecurity. You have minimal security, and that's not going to help you. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I like the point that you said 100% you're going to be breached at one point or another. So, well, in all probability, I won't say it's a guarantee because that sounds very pessimistic. But there is a relatively high chance to this happening. So how do you go about
and think of the attacks that are happening out there. You know, everyone talks about AI, about new attacks coming out. We actually just did a big expose this year about new attacks that came out against our CISO solutions. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious, how do you make sure that you're one step ahead of the attackers, at least within Schneider? Like, what kind of attacks keep you awake at night?
Oh, all of them. I don't get much sleep. Staying one step ahead is part of what you need to do in cybersecurity. You know, defense, of course, is a key part of what you have to do in terms of having a mature cybersecurity program. But I'll circle back around to what else you have to do in a second. But staying one step ahead of the attackers is really, really challenging, because you're dealing with essentially, you're up against human creativity. Yeah. Right. Someone somewhere will think of something and discover something or build something that is completely unexpected. Right. It's impossible to anticipate every single scenario out there. But you do the best that you can. You look at having an effective threat intelligence program is helpful here, because it keeps you at least up to date on what yesterday's attackers have done, right? Tomorrow's attackers, no guarantees, right? But if they're using the same tactics, tools, and processes, then you have a chance of beating them at their game. And one of the things that I highly encourage companies to do is that when you do encounter a cybersecurity incident, when you have an actual against a threat actor, I'm not talking about somebody losing their laptop. It's still a cybersecurity incident, but but doesn't involve a threat actor. But for incidents that involve threat actors, I would fully encourage companies to socialize and circulate the indicators of compromise, the IOCs, to all of the other companies in the ecosystem. Try and socialize that as widely as possible, because one disturbing trend that I do see is attackers use the same tactics over and over and over again, because they succeed almost every single time, right? You know, you think about phishing campaigns, they don't alter much, right? Yeah. You get the same sort of email, small, tiny differences, if any, or you might even get identical emails, and it's broadcast to everybody. Yeah. So if you have an informed defense, if you want to have an informed defense, it's important for us to share indicators of compromise. What are we seeing? You know, where are the server IP addresses that they're using for command and control, for example? What are domains that we need to be aware of? What are the tools that they use? What was their tactic? You know, what was their objective? If we can socialize those kind of that kind of intelligence, then it helps others have a better informed defense. Yeah. But defense is only part of it. I think it's also really important for us to have an effective recovery, right? So it's not if, but it's when the incident or the breach inevitably occurs, despite our best efforts, then it's also important to have a very mature, robust incident response plan, crisis communication plan, practice all of these things. So having crisis simulations and incident simulations, tabletop exercises, or full-blown simulation exercises, and in Schneider, we do a lot of stuff. We do both of those because we know that you need to practice these things. Yeah. Right. If all your practice is your actual incidents, then you're always going to be in a very reactive mode. You need to proactively come up with scenarios that you think are most likely, the most damaging, and then prepare for those, practice those, right? It helps you be better prepared. Everyone has to get involved, all the way from senior leadership down to the operations people on the ground. Involve your legal team, involve your communications team. Come up with a crisis scenario that really mobilizes all the key stakeholders in the company, and then have them all sit down and practice and go through it as an exercise, across 1 day, 2 days. Then you have developed the muscle memory to understand, in general, what do we need to do in an incident? The incident will never match the plan, right? No plan survives the first volley anyways, the first shot. But if you have your principles and your foundation in place and people understand what their role is and what they're supposed to do, it's a lot easier to manage an incident. You don't want to be educating people in the middle of an incident, actual incident. So having effective defenses is really, really important as well. And then, of course, your recovery strategies and all those things that you need in order to be able to get bounce back and as quickly as possible. You minimize the damage at the beginning of the incident and remediations, and then your recovery is also really, really important.
Yeah. No, it's very important. I like the idea that you brought up. If only companies could share this exact incidents that happened, so similar tactics couldn't be exploited at other organizations. So is there something like this in place already? Because I feel like when it comes to companies, you always worried, what if your customers will walk away the more you share this kind of breaches, right? You kind of want to share, but at the same time, if this is going to affect your customer relationship, and then how do you find the middle ground between the two?
Well, you have to consider that this information isn't useful in every context. Like for the general population, it's not terribly useful for them to get IOCs. Right, and they're not going to be able to, like a home user isn't going to be able to do anything. End user is not going to be able to do much with it. So some targeted communication strategy is really important here as well. We have ISACs, information sharing communities out there for different sectors. Banking, finance have their own. Energy sector has their own. The OT world has their own. The pharmaceutical industry. So all the different industrial segments have what they call ISACs, where they share threat intelligence and they share indicators of compromise and, also send alerts out in terms of breaches that have occurred and campaigns that are out there. But I still find them to be somewhat isolated because now you're isolated to a segment. You've built the trust in that segment, but maybe the energy sector may or may not share that information with the pharmaceutical sector. So you start, silos could occur. I know there are mechanisms to share threat intelligence across all platforms, and there are specific protocols like TAXI and STIX that are used to format the information so that it's ingestible, so it becomes all automatic and kind of machine ready. But in my experience, nothing beats the trust and relationship of one CISO picking up the phone and calling the next guy or sending a broadcast message, just saying, hey guys, be aware there's something happening here. It doesn't have to contain details, and it shouldn't contain details, not because if it's not relevant, if I was going to say, hey, this just cost me $10 million, that's not relevant. That's relevant to me, definitely, but it's not relevant to the next guy. But if I say, hey, I believe that there's a serious threat actor out there, these are the tools and techniques that they're using. This is information that's going to be useful to you to help you to mitigate your risk. And if there's an incident that may involve multiple stakeholders, multiple companies, it's really good to have that trust, that relationship, that communication channel beforehand. So it's like, if we've called and talked to each other, we've met face to face, we've shook hands, we've had coffee together, much easier for us to talk about an incident that's impacting both our organizations and working together collaboratively to remediate it, rather than starting off going, you're a complete stranger to me, this is an adversarial. We may not be adversaries, but we're not partners, right? So
no, it makes sense. And I'm just thinking purely from cybersecurity company standpoint. They also want to have this understanding, as CISOs and heads of security share this sort of incidents. Cybersecurity companies also should be aware to prevent these breaches happening in the first place, right? So as a head of security, what kind of challenges you wish cybersecurity companies could protect you from today better?
To me, it's not the responsibility of any one vendor. And I don't think this is really the question isn't really about, which vendor is better or worse. I think it's still, I feel very strongly that it's a community effort. Everyone has a part to play. Everyone has different expertise and level of value that they bring. And what I strongly encourage is having us develop into a stronger community, So it's much easier to attack an isolated house than it is to attack an entire village.
Yes.
If you follow my meaning.
Yes.
Right. So if you have that kind of, we're one tribe, we're all defenders. I mean, you may be my competitor for customers. You may be engaged in the same markets as me. But when it comes to cyber defense, we're all on the same team. We're all fighting the same bad guys, right? Everyone's trying to block the black hats. So that puts us on the same side. And I think it's important for people to recognize that and work together. But if I think also about like technology and what I kind of would like to see, I think technology always has to provide a backstop. So us being humans, we have equal number of weaknesses. We're susceptible to phishing, we're susceptible to doing the wrong thing, insider threats, et cetera, people making the bad decisions. Technology should never replace the human because humans bring so much value in terms of innovation, creativity, knowledge, the ability to perceive a situation and gain and understand what's happening much faster than today's computers. Artificial intelligence is just an algorithm. It will give you predictable outcomes. But what we need are outcomes or ideas for unpredictable situations, because that's what threat actors present us with all the time. So you're never going to, at least not in my lifetime, going to be able to replace the human in the equation. But people need to also be backstop, because just being humans, we'll occasionally make a bad decision, make the wrong decision. Do I go A or B? I'll go B, and then that's the wrong direction. Technology should always provide is a tool and should provide that assurance that if we do the wrong thing, at least there's a catch-all or a net that helps protect the things most important to us. I'm always struck by the example of in the early days of endpoints and laptops, when laptops came out, for the longest time, there's no such thing as hard drive encryption. BitLocker didn't exist, right? It came up later to address a need because people start toting around data, confidential data on their laptops, and then they start losing them, or they would refurbish their laptop and they would send the old one off, and it would end up in some secondhand hardware shop, and then somebody would take out the hard drive and whoop, it's all this data.
Here you go.
Yeah, exactly, right.
You're welcome.
So breach. Encryption was the solution to that. So now, if your device is encrypted, whether it's a mobile phone, whether it's a laptop, wherever we're carrying data, we have the assurance that if we make a mistake, the impact is minimized. I don't lose the data. I lose the device, but I don't lose the data. Right? So I think that technology really has to be oriented around that as let's think of ways that we can apply cybersecurity controls and technologies in order to prevent when mistakes happen or when the unexpected happens, then we have some level of assurance that, we've got some protection at the back end. And I'll give you another example. So if, say, an employee surfs to a site that happens to be hosting malicious content, which is very common, a water and hole attack. You don't know. It looks like CNN, but it's not CNN. So get redirected to this malicious website, and it downloads a plugin, or it downloads something onto your browser, and it starts to run its malicious content. Having antivirus or EDR on your laptop helps prevent that. So having a very effective EDR capable of doing behavioral analytics, machine learning, looking at the processes, having a lot more intelligence behind it helps mitigate or minimize the impact of the thing that the user did, right? So I think that strategy is useful. I would like to see more tools oriented towards that. I know we're very excited about the bells and whistles with AI and GPT and all the things that it can do for us, and give us answers to questions that we didn't even know we wanted to ask.
I'd love actually to pick your brains on these two cases that you actually brought up about the encrypted technology and then downloading that malicious plugin into a system. Because today, even though most enterprises do have EDRs, like whatever size you are, you do have an EDR in place. But then even this technology today, is great in catching most things. But for example, when it comes to malicious macro elements, for some reason, surprisingly, they are not that great at capturing this. And especially when it comes to encrypted technology out there, let's say we're talking about LinkedIn. This is end-to-end encrypted platform.
Mm-hmm.
So it is great for users' privacy. So whoever sends you a message, you're the only one that sees it. But because current solutions typically whitelist this kind of domains, so they don't really see what kind of links are being sent there, and they don't really scan of whatever is going on there. And to take this example even further, they might send trusted website, let's say SharePoint.com, that at the end would redirect to malicious website.
Mm-hmm.
So how you stay prepared for this kind of attacks out there? I know that today a lot of people are considering browser protection solution. Like we have EDR, right now there is BDR that is able to capture this. But how do you, as a CISO of such a large organization, make sure that these kind of sophisticated attacks don't just pass through your EDR?
Well, like I said, the attackers are always thinking of new things.
Yeah.
And you have to adapt and you have to evolve along with them. You can consider maybe managing the browser or deploying an enterprise browser that is custom made for your organization. That's one potential solution. But that's just an example of adaptation for how the attacks are evolving. As many doors and windows as you close and lock shut, the attackers will find some other nook or cranny or unlocked door or window, or even create a new door or window. And that's what keeps this so fascinating for me is it's an ever evolving, never boring challenge, right?
Exactly.
Things are always moving. As technology advances, both aid the attackers, so too must they aid defenders as well. So, we still dance around the topic of quantum computing and how that's going to be detrimental to encryption. Some of the encryption algorithms may be broken and they're not quantum proof. But we're in the process of slowly migrating our algorithms over to now quantum proof encryption. It's a bumpy road. It's not a lift and shift. It definitely has a lot of challenges with it. But that's just an example of, hey, there's technology that's coming down the pipeline. Let's try and anticipate as many different ways that we think it can be used, both for good or bad. Let's try and mitigate as much of the bad as possible in advance, right? But if that doesn't work, again, fall back on your defense mechanisms, right? Or what can you do, or your response mechanisms? What can you do to respond and recover very quickly?
I think I have to ask this question that is practically asked everywhere. What are your thoughts on AI and the whole thing, whether it's helpful to cybersecurity or detrimental?
Double-edged sword. It's double-edged sword. It's helpful to everyone, unfortunately, and everyone includes the attackers, right? It is a tool, and like any tool, like a hammer, you can either build a house or you can tear one down. It just depends on what your intent is, and what's your purpose, right? I am a little concerned about the over reliance that is inevitably going to develop in society on AI as AI develops and evolves. Just like we became very reliant on search engines on the internet to find content. It's just an automatic muscle reflex. It's like, if I need to find something on the internet, I go to a search engine, right? I go to Google, I go to MSN, to wherever, Samsung's Bixby if you want. The browser searches for that information for us. So, versus the old days where you really needed to know the IP address, you needed to know where things were. So it's convenience, but with convenience, there's always a price to pay. And I worry a little bit about, whether or not we, as a society, we become a little bit lazier. If every answer comes from AI, at which point do we start letting AI think for us, right? But that's a societal issue, and that's not really a technological issue. And if I switch hats and look at it as a CISO, as a cybersecurity practitioner, I think that AI will definitely help in defense, and we're already seeing signs of it in terms of helping defenders be a bit more efficient in terms of reducing the amount of analysis you have to do, or automating a lot of that. So that helps. It also helps you be a bit more thorough, because you can use it as, and I frequently do this as well. I use it as not a fact checker, but just to make sure that my particular thoughts or analysis are more complete. So I'll compare my answer to AI to see, what did I forget? What did I not think about?
Yeah.
But I don't rely on the answers that AI gives, because first, there's still a lot of issues with the kind of answers it's given. But AI is useful. I know that, and there's also the machine learning side. We mustn't forget that side as well. So at Schneider, we've always had a lot of analytics when it comes to forecasting, when it comes to, in the operational technology world, maintenance, for example. You want to have very accurate just-in-time forecasting in terms of, when things need to be replaced to be serviced, so that you reduce the amount of cost and overhead associated with operating machine. So AI is a better, faster, cheaper way of accomplishing that same goal, right? So we've embraced those algorithms and that technology in order to help us to be even better at that side of it. So using that machine learning and the data lakes and being able to do the statistical analysis in order to understand, how can we truly benefit from all that technology. And ultimately, at Schneider, we have different goals. It's not just about cost efficiency; it's also about sustainability and environment as well. So there are some more noble goals at play here. So I like that AI helps enable us to accomplish those goals. But like I said, double-edged sword. So you have to be aware of the risks, but you have to also embrace the benefits.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes me think of DLP. Recently, I saw this post by someone that this person was writing, saying, right now, I'm less concerned someone having access to my messages on WhatsApp, but rather access to my ChatGPT search history. So whatever I ask it, whatever data I ask it to summarize. And if we put it in a context of an enterprise, right now, people actually copy paste very sensitive data into ChatGPT and just ask to summarize it. So how do you, as an organization, make sure that these sort of cases don't happen? Because from one hand, you don't really want to blanket block it because it harms user productivity, but at the same time, it opens you to potential risks.
I think one approach that practitioners or cybersecurity professionals and CISOs can take out there is approach it as a data management issue. Who owns data? Where is that data? Where does that data reside? Is that data commingled with everyone else's data? Right? Who has access to that data? So how do you manage the access, the data access management related to that data? Is your data classification accurate? Right? Do you have a proper data classification policy in the first place? Right? So you don't need an AI policy. I find a lot of people, when it comes to even setting the rules, they start to get very fragmented because they go, oh, there's this new problem. We'll create a policy for that. And there's a new problem. We'll create a policy. If you take a step back and realize, no, it's a data management problem. And you already have a data management policy that covers that. If you look at it from that view, the data and the metadata are associated with it, right? Making sure that you understand the terms and conditions in the contract, right? The user license agreement that you're signing when you sign up for these products. Making sure that legal counsel you've gone through that with legal to understand from a data management perspective, how is that handled, right? All the topics about sovereignty, about geofencing, about third-party utilization, third-party access to that data, making sure you own the data, that you control who accesses the data, you control how it's used, how it's utilized, and all the metadata around that as well. Because the behavior that you mentioned, right? Not just the search queries, but how often do you query? What time of day? What country? Because with that information, I could tell you where your R&D centers are, for example, because, that's where most of the research is done.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I don't even need to see the questions, but I start to gain information about you. So you need to be able to manage all of that. And I think that, and I'm seeing the trend now that a lot of companies offering SaaS with AI or AI-related functionality are now being asked by end users these hard questions. Can you tell me about all these things?
Yeah.
But they're also coming up with strategies where they understand and they're modifying their business practices to understand that, hey, ownership of the data is really key, and that should reside with the end user. Now, if we're going to utilize some of the stuff, because we're also a revenue generating company, we need to utilize metadata for advertising, for third party marketing analytics and things like that. Well, then that should be really clear, right, and upfront that hey, we're going to use your data to do these other things so that we can make money, so we don't have to charge you, $1 million to use this, right? So there's a bit of give and take. And then there's also, both sides, I think, need to make an informed decision. Is this a level of risk that you're willing to undertake? Does this fit in your business practice? Cost benefit ratio, does that work out for you? Right? So having a business discussion around it as well. It can't just be a technology only discussion, right? All of this technology is a tool. It's used for something. So the end users and the stakeholders also need to have inputs into that process so that you can make a holistic, informed decision. And then once you make that decision, stick with it, but come back to it and reevaluate it, because things are always changing, right? So making sure that you're also staying abreast of what the developments are.
No, certainly. I think we touched upon a lot of the outside attacks, but when it comes to inside the threat, right? How do you make sure, of course, like having this culture, like as you said, it's a data management problem. But beyond that, I feel like sooner or later there is always this one angry person, or not necessarily angry person, that is either intentionally or unintentionally ends up sharing the data that they aren't supposed to share, or saving it. How do you make sure that less of these kind of cases happen?
So that's where that technology backstop comes really, really important. Because in a human relationship, you have trust. So I trust you to do the right thing. I trust you to use the technology and tools that I've given to you in order to enable you to perform and do your job. I trust that you're not going to go outside of that perimeter, because I trust that you understand the impact of doing so. Right. I have awareness campaigns every year. We have conversations around this. There's so much information in the corporation that's oriented around, the risks and impact of doing the wrong thing. So there's a lot of trust. But technology also has to provide that backstop. So if somebody decides to go out of bounds, there should be mechanisms to detect that. There should be mechanisms to be able to assess exactly what happened. There should be technology to, better yet, prevent that.
Yeah.
So if somebody tries to go and use GPT, right, on their endpoint, then you should have a solution that blocks that, right, and redirects them to, hey, use our internal GPT tool that we're giving you. Use the one that we control and manage and have oversight over. We can see the logs, and we can, if something bad happens, we can contain and minimize the impact of that.
Yeah.
Right. You go with most SaaS solutions out there are a bit scary these days, because the level of oversight and control has diminished as you migrate to SaaS, as you migrate to third-party vendors. So I think that's something that cybersecurity professionals really are keeping an eye on it, and need to continue keeping an eye on very closely to make sure that we have the right level of control and understanding of the tools that we're allowing our users to use, so that we have that risk management in place. And then if users step out of bounds, like I said, there should be at least something that prevents that or minimizes that.
Yeah, remediation strategy around this.
That's right.
Yeah. No, it brings me to this great example that we saw out there. Malicious plugins, right? There are so many free versions of ChatGPT out there. They're like, why do you bother paying them when you can have this free plugin? And then a lot of people don't really understand how powerful those plugins can be and how much access they have. what are your thoughts about it? Do you allow plugins within Schneider, or what are your thoughts?
So I'll deal with the first part of the question about free plugins. Nothing's free.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Right. So if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product.
Yes.
Right? So someone's selling your information and every interaction that you have with that tool to somebody else. Mm-hmm. They're monetizing it. So that's something to keep in mind. Like I said, it's really important for people to understand the risk, to read the end user license agreement, and get legal counsel to read it. Right, get someone whose job it is to understand those very complicated legalese and translate it into plain English so that you understand the risk that the real risk. Right, what is it that you're actually signing up for? I think it's really important. Controlling browser plugins, like I said, there are solutions out there, right? There are EDRs that help mitigate a lot of the risk associated with that. There are also enterprise browsers that you can deploy as your official tool. You don't have to use Chrome. You don't have to use Edge. You can. There are browsers that can be custom built that are pretty functional. But that you control, that you manage completely. So you can have more control over your operating environment. And there are some, so like I said, there are technical solutions out there that go beyond just, raising awareness with the users and stressing to them, I trust you to do the right thing. These are what will happen to you if you don't do the right thing. So that's clearly spelled out in policy as well. So read the policy. Well, actually, one of the things I love about Schneider is we don't have a finger pointing culture. It's very much a learning culture. So I think that people who jump to let's fire that person button right away are missing a golden opportunity. And this is something that I personally hold as one of the things I've learned over the years, as a valuable thing I've learned over the years, is that when you find someone who's made a mistake, hopefully unintentionally, right? And they've learned from that mistake. They've gone through the incident response with you. They understood the seriousness of what they've done, the impact of what they've done. And that person is now actually more valuable because they now have that experience. So the next time they're faced with something, I guarantee you, not only are they going to be far more careful and conscious about it, right? But they're also great ambassadors for cybersecurity. So they're going to tell all of their colleagues, this is what happened to me. Yeah. I don't want you to go through the same pain. I don't want you to face the same things. So be aware that, you shouldn't do this, or this is something that led to that. I think the percentage, at least in my experience, the percentage of people that deliberately malicious, that are intentionally damaging things is actually, thankfully, quite low. Most rational human beings want to do the right thing, right? Yeah. They want to be good people. Nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, I want to be Gru and Despicable Me, and
I want to destroy this world.
Destroy the world or whatever, right? Yeah. I think that percentage of population is very small, and hopefully recognized very quickly and definitely dealt with. So yes, there are certain situations where we can no longer have a business relationship with someone because they're intentionally doing something pretty nasty, right? And we'll continue to do that thing. So you can't prevent that. But for just about everyone else that we engage with when people make mistakes, we find that they're amazing ambassadors afterwards, that they really do help elevate and raise the level of awareness of cyber culture around them. They become like lighthouses or beacons for cybersecurity.
I think what I realized from our conversation, the point that keeps on standing out is the culture of forgiveness, understanding if this sort of incidents do happen, and then you go about educating that something like this doesn't happen. How do you go about building this strong leadership cybersecurity team? Like, how do you make sure that people that surround you are those that gonna enforce the cybersecurity first culture?
The cybersecurity team, so I'm part of governance, risk, and compliance, and that's our job, that's our task. We govern, we do the risk management, and we ensure that we comply with all the legislation, all the very bifurcated and myriad of compliance landscape out there. But when it comes to cybersecurity, it's a cultural thing, and culture has to be part of everyone's DNA. And I really mean everybody, right? I mean, lots of corporations out there say, hey, cybersecurity is my pillar. Cybersecurity is a key focus of our culture, but don't actually demonstrate any or do anything towards it, right? And we ask them, well, what are you doing about building that culture?
I talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's in my annual report.
Yeah.
But for most companies, or at least definitely at Schneider, we want that, and we have made that a commonly understood focus area. It's a constant exercise to make sure that it's top of mind for many executives and employees, but also demonstrated in how we practice cybersecurity, things we do, when it comes to all the way from onboarding. When you first join the company and you're getting onboarded, you're already being exposed to what the expectations are, right? The way you write your policies, the way you deliver your message, it becomes a constant normalized thing. Like this is the way we behave. This is how we act. This is how we think. This is our maturity. And when you talk about maturity, that's what you need. You have to mature into it. You have to grow into it. And it is a long journey and takes constant effort. But just like anything that you're growing, you can't neglect it. You can't leave it and hope that it will grow in the way that you want it to by itself. You have to nurture it, shape it, aim it in the direction that you generally want it to go. And yes, it will move in at its own speed in its own direction, but at least it's headed in the right direction. Right. In the general area that you want it to go. And that becomes, and you're part of that as well. You're part of that organism as well. So it's very important to recognize that you're not only the gardener, but you're also the garden, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, makes sense. And for cybersecurity professionals out there that strive to become a CISO one day, what kind of 3 set of advice could you give to them?
Well, I hope you don't like sleep.
That's a good one.
I will say this. A lot of skills frameworks and career paths have CISO at the top of the pyramid. But I just want to point out that's not the only path to being a leader in cybersecurity. There's the operational side. There's the engineering side. You can be chief engineer. You don't have to be chief information security officer. And even the definition of CISO from organization to organization changes, right? Some of them encompass product security. Some of them encompass physical security. In my case, it's IT and OT cybersecurity. So the roles differ as well. So there's no one size fits all. It's really something that's tailored and crafted to your organization. But if you want to grow into it, I think that you have to have a passion for what you're doing, number one. And you should have a passion for anything that you do in life anyways. If you're going to be doing the same thing for the rest of your life, you better love it. Right? But passion also helps you grow and develop and keeps you motivated and keeps you going when times are really tough, when you're exhausted, when you're dealing with multiple challenges, when you're really stressed. It's the passion that gets you over the roadblock and the hump and keeps you moving forward. But for CISO positions in particular, I think it's important to have a lot of courage. You need to deal with very ambiguous situations very often, making decisions with only some of the information, but keeping in mind the direction you want to go. So being very strategic is also really important. CISOs are also evolving as in general. We're growing into that bridge between or dual hatting, or having two different disciplines merge into one position, where you have to have that business acumen and that business knowledge, as well as the technical, right? And strategy is transversal. Leadership is transversal as well. You have to be able to effectively lead, coach, mentor, and set the direction and be disciplined in moving that way. You are steering the ship. You're the captain of the vessel. So you need to set the direction and move that, and get everyone to move in the same direction with you. So leadership is really important. Vision is also really important, knowing where it is and what you want to do. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? So at Schneider, for example, my vision is to have a safe and secure environment, so that all my colleagues don't have to lose life and limb. Nothing blows up, nothing catches fire because somebody's hacked it. Preventing and mitigating as much cyber risk as possible, and then also making sure that the products and services that we deliver to all our end users are secure out of box, secure by design, right? That they have security built in, not just on the day that we deliver it, but it's also something that is going to be secure across as much of its lifespan as possible, its lifetime. In the OT world, talking decades, right? 20, 30 years. We hope to have that as secure as long as possible, but also, being aware of how long it will be secure for, and maybe doing things once the technology evolves where it's no longer secure. I want an environment where our partners, third party, because we're a huge part of the supply chain, right? We have end users, we have vendors that feed into us. Everybody as part of the community doing their part to make sure that delivery of the services and the enablement of all that energy management is delivered in a safe and secure way. That the planet continues to be green, that we're sustainable, because energy, the production of energy can be a polluter. But if we can encourage through our technology ways that people can be greener, that's great. But no one's going to trust our technology if we're not secure. That's part of the conversation that we have to have.
I think it's amazing set of advice, Andre. One of the things that we also like to ask our guests as we wrap up our podcast is typically previous guests ask questions for the next guest. So our previous guest had this question for you. What should you not be doing?
What should I not be doing?
Yes.
I should not be not sleeping. I should take better care of myself physically. But that's where that passion comes in. I get so engrossed in the amazing stuff that we're doing and the fascinating world that I work in, and I often lose track of the little things that are like eating. I would say not losing sight or not forgetting physical limitations in the pursuit of excellence and the pursuit of making sure of the bigger, larger, noble goals. I have to keep reminding myself I can't get there if I let myself fall apart halfway across the journey.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. And what question do you want to ask our next guest?
What one thing or person has been the biggest influence in your life? And I'm not talking about career, I'm talking about life, in general. So
I think it's a great question. Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for your time. It's been amazing to have you here, and thank you again.
Yes, thank you very much, Sasha. It's been a pleasure. I love the dialogue that we've had today. If we can do this again, I'm more than happy to, but otherwise, really, really enjoyed myself today.
It's been fun. Thanks.